What's up and welcome to XC Tutorials. So today we're going to be going over a few different things. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look over the window tab here. We're going to explain a little bit more about these windows here specifically and how you can use them a little bit better. And then next video we're going to be looking into a bit of scripting. So at that point we are going to start with some actual scripting work, scripting tutorials, kind of from the basics from the beginning. And we're gonna work with implementing things and then going through a lesson of how scripting essentially works in Unity and C# in general. So Unity works with these things that they call windows. So all these little tabs here, this game that I'm dragging around now, is considered a window because I can drag it around, I can move it wherever I want, and I can also dock it wherever I want. So they're considered windows. And I can also resize them and do a bunch of other cool little things like that. If I right click on the top of any window, any of these little tabs here, I'll get a bunch of extra options. Depending on the tab I click on, these options will be a little bit different, but they'll always have add tab, and they'll also always have close tab as well, and then everything else is kind of subject to change. So for add tab, you can add the general tabs that you'd probably be needing, that you'd probably use a lot, such as scene, game, inspector, hierarchy, project, profiler, and animation. Now you already have scene through project basically already laid out on the default layout. Profiler and animation are not there by default, but they are kind of pretty helpful once you get used to them. So we'll look at those in a bit. Then close tab obviously just closes that tab away, and you can also for example, this tab has only those three options, and this one also has maximize, so I can actually make that the entire view if I wanted to, and then I can right click on it and set that back to normal if I wanted. So that's some cool things that Unity can do. Now if I go to add tab, and for example I add game back, it's going to add it to the section that I have highlighted here. So since scene is kind of on its own little window over here, when I go to add tab in game, it's going to add it to that little window there. If I did that over here, then it would add it to this area here. Now you can have multiple of the same window, but that doesn't increase efficiency really. If I ran this game, then basically the last window that I have opened, or the last window I have focused, is going to be the one that's going to actually be updating and rendering things. So I'm not going to be able to have two different windows rendering things at the same time. They might show like the last frame on each window, but for example, if I had this game view clicked here and I had this one in focus, and this one would be the one that's being updated and rendered, and I can see what's going on gameplay wise on this one, and this one will just show the last like still frame since the last time I left focus of it. So that kind of applies to all the tabs as well. Having two inspectors doesn't really allow you to have two different objects selected with two different inspectors going on. It will just update both inspectors to have the same object data you're looking at, things like that. So it is still pretty cool that you can create multiple tabs though. So let's look at window. So the top here in window, we have a lot of things we can add, and a lot of them, a good part of this is kind of already here, but services, you might notice in the more newer version of Unity that this has a services tab that's automatically started, and as well as a an asset store tab as well. So if we look at services, I'm going to expand this a little bit. Basically, let me quickly sign in actually. So when we look at services, we have all of our information here. Now we can select our organization, and then we can create a basically a project that Unity can use to help us track information about our game. That could be things such as analytics, other services that have like networking, and basically things to help you build your game out and be able to monitor things of your game, especially with networking. I believe you do have to actually create a service for that, as well as ads and things like that. So you can implement mobile ads and stuff in your game as well, and actually get revenue off of that and things like that. Obviously it's not a great amount of money. Likelihood of people actually clicking on ads is pretty low, but it's still possible to add them, and if people do click on them, then you do end up making a few cents, so that's always nice. And obviously it's a lot better when you have a lot of people clicking on your ads and doing all that stuff. So it's really nice to have services, but normally you don't really have to worry about that until the end of your game when it's kind of relevant. And also depends on the game that you're making as well. It might not work for for some of the services, like it may not be the best model for some of the services that Unity offers, or it just might not work for your project. But that's a default window you can always close out of. And also the asset store is another one that opens up all the time. So the asset store is where you can actually basically go to find, well, assets, and they're basically a bunch of tools or packages of scripts, models, sounds, really anything. For example, the categories over here of a bunch of things you can import into your project, and you can use those in your project. For example, let's look at something in 3D models. You're able to buy or download some of these 3D models and add them into your project, and then you can use this next gen furniture in your project, whatever that might be. You can use these chairs and things like that and use them in your project and stuff. Obviously you might have to check in a little bit with the licensing, but there's also things for scripting as well. You can find cool little scripts and little packages and assets like Final IK for animations and things like that. A-star pathfinding, so A-star pathfinding, automatically kind of figuring out how to get around objects and things like that. There's a bunch of assets that already kind of cover a lot of things, like easy save helps with saving actual data information and things like that. So there's a lot of different assets the store offers, and you can also do searches as well. So you can specifically search for something you want. For example, like rain. If you're looking for like rain particle effects or something, you can find some of those, and you can search by free only or paid only and find and see what you like. Clicking on them will give you information about how it works and details of the asset itself, comments and the package itself, what it actually contains, and comments down here so you can see what people are saying about it. And normally, hopefully, they do include a video with it or multiple videos to show you exactly how it works and how it works inside the editor, and probably a little bit of a trailer kind of thing with it, so they can kind of promote it a little bit more. But that's basically the asset store. It lets you buy and download assets. You can also create your own assets and add them to the asset store as well, which we might be doing a video later down the line on. So that's the asset store, and go ahead and close out of that. And then other windows are things like that we haven't seen yet. For example, animation. Now this is just me, but I like to normally have animation down here with my project in console, just because I normally am not doing very much with it, so I don't really have to look at it too often. But the animation window is going to let you basically create animations for very specific objects. So for example, if I click on one of these objects here, I can create an animation for this main camera, do something with it in Unity, and then that will be saved as an animation. I would have to have the record button on. So if I go ahead and preview that, let's go ahead and create camera pan, for example. I'm just going to call that the name of the animation. So if we create that, we can add the property manually from the camera's perspective or inspector, or we can click on record, this little record button here. Then I can basically just start working. This is why I like to have this kind of docked down here, so it's just not intrusive as well. I can basically just start moving this around, and I will just have to move this slider where I want it to be to kind of get an effect. Now if I play it back, then you can see that it's already animated just like that. So if I hit spacebar, then I can see the animation play, and it will loop. So I can also go into the projects and click on the object, go to the inspector for it, and I can turn off loop, so it'll only happen once. And that's basically the animation window in a nutshell. You can do a few other cool and advanced things as well. You can work with sample rates and different other details. You can have multiple animations and things like that. When you do that though, on the object it will create an animator. So there's also a window for that. And this is where it can get confusing, mixing up animation with animator. Animation is used to actually create the animations. Animator is used to help transition and handle the events and effects of those animations. So when you import objects with animations, you are going to be working in the Animator. When you want to create animations in Unity, you'll be working with the animation. And then when you're done with those and you want to, for example, have a camera pan or like a camera zoom or something like that as an animation, then you can go over to your Animator and choose how it's going to actually work. So the Animator is a little bit more advanced and does come with a lot of advanced information, settings, and details. It comes with a bunch of layers, which gets into avatar masks and layer masks and things like that. To have, for example, games like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike where you're moving and you're shooting at the same time, or you're looking around and your body's rotating as you look around, but you're also still walking at the same time. So you have two animations kind of being played at once, things like that. The layers can kind of handle that, but it gets a little bit complex in doing that. As well with parameters, you can also create parameters with this little plus sign at the top here, and you can create floats and spools and triggers. Triggers are basically true or false conditions, essentially, and the bool is kind of the same. Sort of. Bool is true and false conditions. Trigger is kind of one of the elements in it is going to be either on or off, technically, in the sense that it will work like add another one here. So if I had this one on, then it would work in a sense where I can link these two up and only one of these can ever be on at once, kind of thing. So where this is kind of on or off, so it's either this condition or that condition type thing. And then ints and floats or int values are whole numbers, and floats can have decimals with it. So these can be used by script to determine how you can change all these things by script, and then you can create, for example, you can click on any state, make a transition, and click on anything. Now in that transition, you can choose the condition of how you want to use things. So I have all those things I just created over here. You can choose what you want to do. For example, with int, if that value is greater than some number, then this trigger is going to then this animation is going to be triggered, basically, and that transition is going to happen towards the camera pan. So you can set up scripts to handle that stuff, which is why this is really, really cool and really in depth. So that's one element of it. Now the only thing is you can't really zoom out or in within this window. You can only kind of pan up and down and left and right kind of thing. And it is technically restricted. You can only have so many animations on screen, but you have any state entry. Now with any state, that basically means if anything is happening, then it's very possible that an animation can be transitioned to that. So if I start the game and an animation plays, then if it's attached to any state, then if I'm not doing anything, it's possible that that animation will also be triggered automatically, because it can happen at any time in any condition. That's not always a bad thing. For example, you might have a jump in maybe on a grounded situation, but you might have a double jump in an any state situation, or a run in an any state situation, a walk into any state situation, because you can kind of transition from walk to run at any point and run to walk at any point, things like that. We can also make that very specific, where you can only go into run if you're on the ground, and you can only go into walk only after you're into run and things like that. You can have very specific conditions. You can also have transitions from that object to somewhere else, and I don't think you can actually have it on any state, but if you had another animation here, you can attach that so that the condition would be basically something that would happen that will go to this, and then when this is done, something that will happen to go back to some other animation that's attached to. Now entry is used for the actual default state of the object. So when the game starts, the very first animation that plays is whatever is attached to entry, and only one of those can be attached to entry, which is what the kind of orange brownish arrow represents. If you click on an object, you can set that to be the default state, and then exit is basically the exit condition for those. Honestly, I don't really use this that often because I script them normally if I have to have those kind of conditions. And it depends on how complex I'm making something as well. So you can move these around and kind of, design it to however you feel works best for you. So that's some cool things you can do with the Animator. There are also other windows as well, such as a profiler. So this window is basically when you're running your game. Just gonna hit run. You'll be able to see data about your game that's happening in real time per frame. So you can see information about how fast your game is currently running, the MS rate. You can see what's happening with the rendering right now. Obviously nothing, because there is nothing to render, so that's pretty calm. But if I add objects and things like that, then there'll be a little bit of rendering happening. How much memory usage is being used, audio and video, and just a lot of other settings as well. You can customize these and have a lot of different settings. Going to current will show you the current time frames, because you can click on individual points and kind of stop the profiler for a bit and to kind of see what was happening at that point and get some additional details on exactly what was going on there. And then you can go back to current and have it run again. So with this hierarchy here, unpause that. With this hierarchy here, it will tell you exactly what's going on in real time. So you'll get to know exactly that now the camera is doing some rendering work, and then now the player update time is being ran, and now the camera is doing more rendering work, and this is basically the order of exactly what's happening. So this is happening first, and then the second thing goes down, and so on and so forth. So when a new event happens in Unity, then that event happens at the top. So you can see exactly what's going on and how they're ordered, and they're also kind of ordered by how they're being used as well. So if I go to total, then the thing that has the highest total is going to be at the top of the list, and if I go to time MS, the thing that has the highest time is going to be at the top of the list. Self, cells, and so on, they'll all kind of work under that idea. So this is really great for when you're wanting to basically try to debug your game, and you're looking into efficiency and programming efficiently, different ways you can go about doing that. And maybe there's a problem with your game, there's a bug that happens at this very specific moment, at this very specific area, at this very specific time for whatever reason. You can kind of profile it and kind of see why and where that's happening and what might be causing it. Also, if your game is lagging a little bit for whatever reason, you can probably see what might be causing it. It might be due to too much rendering happening, or maybe there's not enough CPU power, or even possibly just scripts in general are probably being eating up a lot of resources for things like that. So you can look at your efficiency and try to figure it out and break it down. Your scripts and their functions will also appear in this list as well. So if there's a function that might be lagging your game up a little bit, you can see exactly how much usage that function is taking up at the moment. So I'm going to close out of that. And there are also other windows like audio mixer, when you get into adding different audio sounds and things like that, and you want to add little effects and kind of echoes and stuff like that. You can also do that through the audio mixer. And then the sprite packer, lighting for settings. When you get into 3D modeling, well, 3D modeling and technically 3D objects in general, you can kind of set up information for how your game is going to handle lighting, and how halos are going to work, fog if you want fog, and how that's going to work, and as like default settings, shadows, and just lighting in general, as well as baking. So when you add terrain, mostly when you add terrain, Unity will automatically bake the terrain light, which normally takes some time. So you can have that manually bake, or you can actually turn that baking off entirely. So these are a lot of really useful and helpful windows that Unity does have and provide, which is really nice. But they do all kind of take their own bit of time to understand and learn, and we'll probably end up doing videos specifically for them later on down the road as well. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully that give you a little bit of insight on things. If you plan to do a project with something, you should hopefully be able to have some information on what you want to do. If you're doing a 3D project and you have models, you might want to work with the Animator. If you're creating animations in Unity, you might want to work with the animation, which will probably tie in with Animator as well. And scene view and things like that, you'll be working with those a lot as well, and possibly profile later on once you get into the scripting side of things as well. So this should give you a good base to kind of go off of, and we will be covering all of these windows later on in later videos as well.